This is the first Big Wild Year video of 2019, up to day 6. I'm going to show you 3 dishes that I've cooked from a side of bear and do a brief update on the Big Wild Year to date. And you should know that we'll be doing a live stream soon, so stay tuned to this channel for a live stream as well. This is a nice side of ribs, and the bear was cut in half with a meat saw, so there's also a tenderloin along this top piece. Jeremy here on the One Wild Crafter channel, and what I've got is most of the side of a bear. This is the remaining back end of that side of bear. And what I've got here in front of me is a random garbage bag that I pulled out of my freezer. I knew it was bear meat, but I wasn't sure what cut. And I decided that what I'm going to do with it is cut off an end that'll fit in my slow cooker. I'm gonna slow cooker some today. And the rest I'm just gonna throw back in my fridge because parts of it are still frozen. And I think I'm gonna do this other piece in the oven in a day or 2. So I already made a cut with my knife here, and I'm just gonna finish it with my saw. There it is. So there's the rib, the spine, and this would be a piece of the tenderloin here. Just want to check it for hair, take off any hair that I find. And one thing I'm really excited about on this bear is the amount of fat that's still on the outside of this guy. So I was kind of disappointed with the amount of fat that I got off of my bear. This is the bear from the Wooded Beardsman, or it might be from Rob's Bear Hunt. But these guys left a lot of fat on the edge, so I'm going to make sure that when I cook this, I do it in such a way that I get to keep all the fat. And doing it in the slow cooker is one way to do that. Doing this in a roasting pan is another way. Oh, it's a close fit. Perfect. Okay, Dolphiny's got more spice at her house, so I have a kind of a limited selection here right now. But what I'm gonna do is wash my hand first before I handle these jars. All right, that's better. So here I've got a little bit of Labrador tea, so I'll add a couple leaves of that just as a flavor experiment. These are juniper berries that I picked while I was deer hunting. I'll add half a dozen of those. And my third addition here, these are some hawthorn berries and rose hips. So throw a few of those in there as well. Add some water. Put on the cover. And what I'll do is I'll put it on high, and then when I leave for work, I'll just crank it back to warm and just let it kind of sit there all day. Have a look in here. Oh, bringing the steam. It's falling apart as I lift it, so I think that's a good sign. We'll just let it cool down, and then Dolphiny's going to tell me something clever to do with all this fat gravy something. Maybe just keep rendering it, and then we'll have juniper, rose hip, hawthorn flavored bear fat.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
Wild leeks. That's our These would also, oh, they're going to be good at so many things. I'm just thinking out loud, but they're going to be good tonight. with our bear ribs slash loin roast. Okay, Jeremy here on the One Wild Crafter channel, and what I've got is most of the side of a bear. I already took off a few of the front ribs and cooked them the other day, and what I want to show you is just how I'm going to take off the remaining ribs to do a rib roast. So I'm going to get my knife, and I want to feel back to the last rib. I'm going to poke my knife through. You can see my knife on the other side here, and follow that rib out to the flank. So now I've cut and separated the rib from the flank and this hip. Get my saw, and I'm just going to cut through the spine. And here, now I have a whole rack of ribs. I'm gonna leave that diaphragm meat on there, and there's a tenderloin along the back side of the ribs here. Lots of rib meat and lots of fat. And what I'm gonna do with these is put them in the oven on a low temperature. After I clean up some of the hair on here. And I'm going to try and put them on a wire rack so that all the fat accumulates in the bottom of the pan. There's a bit of discoloration on the fat here that I'm going to trim off. And let's see if it fits my pan. Here's the pan I'm using. It does not have a wire rack, so the ribs are just going to end up sitting in the bottom of the pan. And oh, look at that. It's like a perfect fit. So let's tidy this up a little bit, and then we'll add some spices. This is an all wild, big wild year recipe. So all the things that I'm adding are foraged foods. I'm going to start by throwing in some juniper berries. They can just, maybe they'll just stick to the fat, just kind of permeate from there. So these juniper berries I picked while deer hunting. I have some rose hips and hawthorn berries. These are dried out, just at room temperature or maybe in a dehydrator. And I'm going to throw those in here too, because I find that bear meat pairs really well with different kinds of fruits. Got some Labrador tea, which I used on another bear roast that I did. I'm just going to throw a few leaves on here for their flavor. And the liquid gold maple syrup. Ooh. So I'll put a couple shots of this on the bear, maybe a shot for me too. Oh yeah, that's good. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of water to this, and then we're gonna put it in the oven at 300 degrees and leave it in there for a few hours, and then we'll check back in on it. While this bear cooks, I'm also keeping up to some acorn flour that I'm processing so that we can start eating that and incorporating that into our wild food diet as soon as possible. And all I'm doing here is, after having ground the flour down in a hand mill or an electric mill, adding cold water and mixing it, and you can see that the tannins leach out into the water and the water becomes colored. Part of how you know that there's still a lot of tannins in your flour. And then I'll add fresh cold water, mix it all up, and then put it back in the refrigerator to settle out. And I'll keep repeating that process until all of the bitterness is gone from the flour. I'm going to add this one into my big one, just so it takes up less space in my fridge. Once this process is done, after a few days, then I'm going to dry the flour out in my dehydrator and then put it back through a finer mill so that there's none of these chunks in it. You can see them floating around in here. That'll all be ground down very fine. So I'm going to take them out of the oven, and they're going to travel with me to another oven for a lunch date. I came into the house and they smell so good. Let's have a look here. Try and keep out of range of the steam. Ooh. Yep, that smells really good. I don't know if this is a Labrador tea leaf. That might just be a random. But it looks good and moist in there. The meat's looking pretty cooked. I can smell the maple syrup a little bit. We might add a little bit more. And I think it's going to be all right. This is the remaining back end of that side of bear. So this piece here, you can see the tailbone. The hip is in here. And this was the last piece of loin, which I sawed through in order to get these two pieces to fit in the pan. So what I want to do with these guys is I'm just going to add some water and some of my wild spices, and they're going to sit in a little bit of water here and simmer for hours at a low temperature. And one of the things that I'm really excited about this piece of meat is that there's a lot of pieces of really nice bare fat from inside the abdominal cavity, and this I'm going to collect out of the pan after, and that's going to make some really great cooking lard or cooking grease to add to some other dishes later. So I'm going to do this one a little bit differently than the other ones. Here I have some dried goldenrod, and it has a little bit of a licorice flavor. I'm going to throw some of these leaves in here. And I also thought that some of these wild raspberries might also go nicely in here, so I'm going to add some wild raspberries. Maybe that's a cup or just over a cup. Fine fruit goes really well with bear meat. And of course our ever-present maple syrup. Put a little bit of that in there. Although it also works well to add the maple syrup after the bear meat has cooked. Put in half a quart of water, 3/4 of a quart, And we're going to turn that on low. And we're just going to leave it. 10 hours later, what have we got? Some of the fat hasn't really... Oh, it's gone mushy though. So it hasn't melted, but it's lost a lot of its structure. And that is some tender bear meat right there. That looks real good. So at this point, just have to decide how I want to eat this. Could just serve it up as a roast, slice it up and eat it. Might want to cut it off and then turn this into a stew by taking the bones out. So there's lots of ways to eat that. Guess I'll try a little bite here. It's very tender. It's very good. Excellent meat. So this is bear roast. This is day 6. This is the end of day 6 of the big wild year, our 365-day wild food only challenge. And what that means is that for the last 6 days, Delphine and I have not had caffeine, not had alcohol, not had gluten or refined sugar or any grocery foods, no agricultural products. Strictly, we've been living off of food that we've gathered, hunted, picked, foraged in the wild. And we've been posting daily updates on Instagram at Delphine Collier, and I post daily on my Facebook page, which has a public profile. And this is sort of our first update. And I'm just keeping it brief because we're just getting some hardware in which will allow us to do some good live streaming. And we want to very soon do a live stream question and answer and an update. We can talk about some of our starting health parameters. You probably have a good idea about what kind of food we have stored away at this point. But we can talk also about what we plan to do through the winter to be adding to our food supply. So stay tuned for that. And if you haven't had bear meat before, I encourage you to get some and try it. It's very good. And bear meat is a pretty big part of our big wild year. We have 2 of them in the freezer, 2 bears. And we'll also be out this spring probably looking for another bear by then to fill the freezer, and then another one in the fall. Hope you're enjoying this challenge, and stay tuned for more updates. So what I decided to do with this bear meat in the end is I pulled it all off the bone and then set the bone aside to simmer in a bone stock. So this is all boneless bear meat, and I had left it on at a really low temperature, so I'm just heating it back up now. And with all the juices from that bear meat, I'm just simmering down, sorry about the shaky camera, into a sauce or a gravy. And I don't have a starch or a flour right now really to thicken this, so I did 2 things. One is I skimmed out some of the acorn flour that I have in the fridge right now. It's leaching by the cold leach method, and it tasted like it was not quite done, but it was very mild. So I skimmed out some of the finer particles and I added them to this gravy mix. And then the second thing that I did is I got some of my hen of the woods mushrooms and I ran them through my NutriBullet until they were basically a powder, and I added them to thicken it up as well. So I'm going to let this simmer down and keep stirring at it. Then we'll check back in a minute and see how this turned out. starting to thicken up nicely. It was very watery when I began, and I see that the little mushroom bits that I threw in have soaked up a lot of liquid. I'm going to turn this down a little bit so that it doesn't get away on me, and I think I want it just a little bit thicker than that. So I'm going to simmer it just another minute or two. Okay. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And I just tasted it, and it tastes amazing. So I'm going to turn the heat off. I'm going to leave it on the heat. Just to finish it for one more minute. And the other thing that I've got going on over here is this is purslane. So I had blanched the purslane. It's a garden weed where I live. I picked this out of a garden. I foraged it in a garden. So I just steamed that from frozen. And that's my green. Let's see how this all comes together. Oh yeah, that looks pretty good. Some pulled bear meat. There's some nice marrowy bits in here too from the spine bone that was with that rib roast. I'm gonna pour this juice off just into my roast. No sense wasting it. There's my purslane. It's lost most of its nice color. That's alright. And we're gonna get some gravy on there. Oh, look at that. Day 7 supper.